Hey guys, so I just want to touch on training during the lock-in or during the whole corona pandemic that's going on at the moment. So depending on what your background is, depending on where you're coming from, you're going to potentially be approaching your training in a couple of different ways. Either you're going to be doing activities which are incredibly variable already. So for example, you may be attending circuit classes, Barry's Bootcamp, CrossFit, and there's nothing wrong with any of those things. Certainly with the audience that I work with, we're much more body composition focused, and then in which case we'd certainly push on a much more structured way of approaching training, a way where we're much more tightly managing certain variables to achieve the goal of maximizing physique change. Now, if performance is obviously your goal, or you're looking for general physical preparedness, then of course your training should ideally mirror that, and then in which case, a program like CrossFit, listen, I competed in it for years and years and years. It's fantastic for creating general physical preparedness across a number of different fitness and physical qualities. However, if your goal is to really maximize physique change, to really lay down quality amounts of muscle tissue, or at least during this phase, which we're in at the moment, is to certainly maintain it, then I would certainly ask of you to think about having far more structure to your training sessions. So what I mean by that is that many people may have had a program that they were following in the gym. They may have had a logbook that they were logging from week to week to week, sticking to a plan, hopefully for longer than just 4 weeks, which is what most people tend to do in the old model. Hopefully people are really pushing that logbook for long and long and long till they no longer are getting a benefit from an exercise and then are rotating something else in. But ideally, you've got that progression that you're tracking over long periods of time. And whether that be chasing increases in intensity for a phase, volume for a phase, or both. It just depends on what your approach is, how much you're managing volume. Is it more of a high intensity, low volume program? Is it more of a higher volume and more managed intensity program? No, neither one is necessarily wrong. It just depends on the individual and what they're going to respond best to. However, I digress. So in terms of training during this time period, I think the one message that myself, Mal, Mark, Ben, all the guys in the Better Body Collective have been trying to get across to people is, just because we're now training at home, just because we no longer have access to a gym, doesn't mean that we shouldn't have structure. So I'm in the middle at the moment of putting together a progressive home training plan that takes into account a number of different things. So it's going to work over 12 weeks. It's going to be split into a few different phases, and there's going to be plans available for just bodyweight, for if you have access to bands, if you have access to dumbbells, or if you have access to a number of different things like TRX. And so it's going to be a fairly comprehensive resource that's going to allow you to really get the most out of your home training. And the reason why I feel so strongly about putting that together is I just see so many people going from structured plans in the gym, and now they're just doing all sorts of random stuff because some fitness person they know posted on an Instagram live, hey, we're going to do this workout, let's just get sweaty, tired and just work hard. And listen, that's okay if all you're interested in doing at the moment is just moving and getting some exercise in. However, if you're wanting to come out the other side of this whole thing with a little bit more to show for it, a little bit more, okay, well, I've started a plan, I've seen progress from week to week, and I came out the other side actually with an outcome, then I would suggest that you really think about getting a structured training program in place. Now, if you're not sure how to do that on your own, I would thoroughly recommend that you reach out to a bunch of professional coaches. Who knows, maybe myself or one of the guys, one of my team at the Better Body Collective. But listen, we're always more than happy if you're not based here and you want to maybe work with someone online who's closer to where you are. We're always more than happy to recommend. We have no ego that way. So what type of ways could we potentially look to progress training? Well, what I would say is that we don't have intensity anymore. At the end of the day, that would be one of the key drivers. We know that mechanical tension is the key of the three drivers of hypertrophy. It's the key one. Now, we ideally need heavy loads going through full range of motion with control and intent. We can't do that at the moment. We just don't have access to that sort of loading. We can't get in the gym, get on a hack squat. We can't load a barbell. At least most of us can't anyway, unless you've got a really cool home gym. If you have, good on you. But for most of us, we might have access to maybe a few dumbbells. In our case, we have adjustable dumbbells. Others may not even have access to any of that stuff. So what can we potentially manipulate in order to still get progress in our training? We can look at a few different variables. So take intensity off the table. We can't add loads. We can look at things like time under tension, and there's a couple of different ways to manipulate that. We can look at doing time sets. So for example, following sets which are maybe 60 seconds in length, following a specific tempo. That might be that probably a good idea at this point in time to have a slow eccentric tempo, potentially even a slow concentric tempo, which means you might be used to doing, like, say, 3 seconds on the way down and then coming up. It might be for this phase, say you're doing a split squat, you might want to do 3 seconds down, 1 2-second pause, 2 seconds up, really maximize the amount of tension you're placing at all points of the movement for this phase, because you don't have access to the load. So you can play around with tempos, you can play around with total time under tension, you can play around with volume as well. Maybe you've got everything you can out of that. You've maybe pushed, time under tension and tempos, really slow tempos up to 90 seconds. And you're at a point where, right, well, I need to take it on a step now because I'm not getting a response anymore. That's where you might add in a set, or you might increase the rep range. So there's a number of different ways that we can progress. However, it's just got to be planned out in advance, and it's got to be structured in such a way where, like, right, how am I going to see progress from week to week to week, and what is my plan for when that stalls? So, for example, if we're not going to use something like tempos, or we've maximized that, it might be, right, what else can I do to create a greater challenge? It might be that we say, right, well, I've been doing normal reps, now I'm going to add 1 1/4 reps or triple contraction reps, or whatever the method is. There's plenty of ways that we can take the same movement and progress and progress and progress. Another example might be we might reduce the rest period, so we increase density within our sessions. So these are all things that, I want you to just start having a bit of a think about. Like, how can you take maybe something as simple as bodyweight exercises and continue to make them more and more challenging over this 4-8-12 week period? The reality is that we're all a bit maybe flustered at the moment. It's a bit of the fear of the unknown. We don't know when we're going to get access to a gym again. So, if we kind of think about, let's buckle in for at least 8 weeks, put a plan in place, we can get the most out of this time, and we can actually come out of this whole quarantine situation with actually as a better athlete, or a better, if you're a competitor, a physique competitor, or whatever else, CrossFit or whatever it is you do, or you can come out of this a lot more robust, doing a lot of isometrics, slow control. You can really dial in some really quality movement patterns, get a much better mind-muscle connection, so that when you come in, you can maybe spend a lot more time on things like mobility. And then, of course, the stuff we won't talk about because it's not related to training, but of course things like your sleep, your stress management, your nutrition. But we can spend a lot more time on things that we maybe normally neglect a bit more. For me, since I stopped CrossFit, I've neglected my mobility a ton, and I'm really implementing a lot more of that and already starting to feel the benefits. So have a think about that type of stuff. Think about your training approach. Think about what can you do during this period to come out of this in a stronger position than you came into it.